Hello students, in this video we'll be beginning the chapter on human eye and colorful world. We discuss as to the different parts of the human eye and how the different parts help us to see the different things in our surrounding, how they help us to distinguish one object from another, and how we can differentiate between one color and another, and why do we see actually color in the first place with respect to different objects and with respect to sky and the different phenomenon that we see in our day-to-day life, like rainbows and so forth. Okay, so let's begin with the chapter on human eye and the colorful world. So here you see the eye is present over here. This is a sketch or a rough diagram on the eye, and you see the different parts are labeled of the eye over here. Now each one of them have certain functions. Okay, though for us it may look like just a simple eye, over here we have different parts of the eye, and each one of them has certain role, certain function in enabling or helping us to see different things that we see in the day-to-day world and the way we see it. The eye, we may call the eye as round. It is spherical in shape. It's a sphere. Now, coming to the first part of the eye. If you have a look, the first part that our slide tells us is that of the cornea. And the cornea is somewhere over here. Have a look. Now, what happens in cornea? It says light falls on the cornea and the white clear part of the eye, which is slightly bulging outward. So just the outside part of your eye which comes out, okay, and that part is referred to as the cornea. This outside part, okay, that comes out, it is tough and it protects the interior of the eye from accidents. So the function of this is to protect the interior of the eye from any, sometimes fingers go in our eye, or we sometimes even some dust goes in our eyes, or some dirt, or minor accidents can take place when we fall on the face and so forth. So eyesight is very important, and to protect that, not in a great way, but yes, to a certain extent, the cornea helps in this thing. And you have to remember also the part that the light first enters the eye, or it falls on the eye first on the cornea. So it's very, very important. It's the white clear part that you see um, in your eye. Next comes is the iris. Okay, have a look where the iris is. The iris is inside. Now we were talking about the outside part, the cornea. The iris was inside. It is a muscular structure behind the cornea, okay, of the eye. And what does it do? It controls the amount of light reaching the interior of the eye by automatically adjusting the size of the pupil. If you notice, sometimes what happens is, if we are in a dark room and somebody puts a torch on us, or just somebody switches on the light, okay, what happens? Can we just open our eyes immediately? No. We tend to shield our eyes. Shield our eyes means protect our eyes, because of the light that is coming in is too much. Actually, the light is okay, but because we have been sleeping in the dark, or our eyes have been closed for a very long time, when we open, there's a lot of light rays that rushes into our eyes. So to protect the amount of light from entering the eyes and damaging the eye, we have something called as the iris, a muscular structure behind the cornea. It's over here, and it is automatically adjusting the size of the pupil. We'll come to the pupil next, okay, which allows the light to allows the light to enter further. Now the iris is a part of which gives it the color such as the black, brown, green eyes, okay, which we commonly call as cat eyes. Okay, so what we see as black or brown, that is the iris. Next, we discuss the mention of pupil when we were talking about iris. So pupil regulates and controls the amount of light entering the eye. So what is the difference between the iris and pupil? See, iris controls the amount of light and reaching the interior of the light. Imagine the iris like a gate. Okay, it regulates who comes in, who goes out. I mean, basically nobody goes out. The eyesight is such that we take in light from our surroundings. So the iris acts like a gate, like a watchman on the gate, okay, and he makes sure who's coming in, how much of light is coming in to the eye, and depending on the situation. Pupil, on the other hand, regulates and controls the amount of light. Imagine pupil like a secretary to the eye, okay, wherein he decides as to how many people will go in to meet the main person, okay, whether five people go in or four people. So in this case, pupil regulates and controls the amount of light entering the eye. Iris only does the job of whether it should allow the light or not, okay. But once the light is inside, then the pupil decides as to how much of light should actually be entering the eye and ultimately reaching what we call as the retina, okay. So that is why it is crucial when we try to see bright objects, okay. What happens is first the iris comes into play, which gives an automatic signal for our eyes to close or to shut, okay. But what has happened about the light that has already gone through, okay, there is a certain amount of light that would have already passed through the iris. In that case, the pupil regulates the amount of light that is actually entering the interior of the eye. Then comes the lens, okay. We have spoken about the mirror and the lens in the previous chapter on light reflection and refraction. So our eyes are not made up of mirrors, they are made up of lenses. And if you have a look, we see the lens over here, okay, mentioned, and we have a crystalline lens which is biconvex, okay, it is bi. So in other words, it's made up of two convex lenses. That is why it is said biconvex shaped lenses, and it is located behind the pupil. So pupil will be this fine lining, and behind that you will have your biconvex lens, okay. And what does it do? It focuses the light on the retina. See, this is the retina, which actually is responsible for this image creation and for us to basically understand, okay, what are we looking at. So before the image falls on the retina, it has to go through the lens. The lens is what actually focuses the light and of course the image onto the retina. Then you have the ciliary muscles. Have a look where the ciliary muscles are marked. So it is on the either side flanking the lens. So the lens is contracted and relaxed by the ciliary muscles. The focal length is varied by its movement. Now it is a lens. So if it is a lens, there would be a focus point. Okay, there will be in one point the image object, and the other, and it will be the image form. There will be a focus point depending. Now the focus point can vary, and vary meaning keep changing depending on how far the location of the object is. Sometimes the object is far away, sometimes the object is far away. Sometimes you strain your eyes to have a look actually to see certain things, sometimes in the dark, and sometimes when the print on whatever you're reading is too small. Then this ciliary muscles come into play, and they actually alter the focus point, and in doing so, of course, this would alter the focal length uh, of the image that is being formed. Then you have the retina, that is at the back of the eye over here. Okay, now what does the retina do? The lens forms, we told you about the lens, right? So lens focuses the light, or in other words the image, onto the retina, and the lens actually forms a real inverted image of the object. But despite the fact that it forms a real inverted image, we don't see objects upside down. Okay, we don't see them upside down. Rather, we see them the way they are. Okay, if they are erect, then we see them as erect. If they are inverted, then we see them as inverted. But the way they are not in any other fashion. So how does that happen? So the retina contains several nerve cells which convert the optical images to signals to the brain via the optic nerve. You see the optic nerve over here. Okay. Once the message received, the message is received in the form of images, right? Now, but the brain cannot interpret that. So to make sure that the brain interprets this message and reacts accordingly, the images that are formed onto the retina are converted into signals, basically electrical signals that are passed through this optical nerve, which do the job, and they immediately send the message to the brain. The brain can read electrical messages, not optical images. So the message is sent through the optic nerve to the brain, and when it does that, the brain interprets it accordingly and associates the particular image with the information that it has acquired over the past, or based on its history. Okay, like for example, you have been shown that a tiger is dangerous or a snake is dangerous. So next time you see an image of an object that looks similar to that of an object or that of a snake, then what will happen is the brain will interpret it as a danger and send the message to the proper response centers, okay, where we have learnt about control and coordination, and accordingly look to take action, okay, whether to react to that, as in to fight against it or to run away. Okay, it's like saying flight or fight reaction. And then we have our adrenaline rush, okay, whether to fight or whether to run away. So nerve cells, there are two types of nerve cells. You have the cones, something called the cones, and the other one are called rods. Cones are sensitive to bright light and help us recognize colors, and rods are sensitive to dim light, so mainly get activated. So you, in case of dogs, cats, they are, particularly cats, they have a lot of rods which enable them to see well in the night and hunt in the night. Most of the those who can see in the night, the cats, like big cats also, like tiger, lion, they can see well in the night, because that's because they've got a lot of rods. We don't have to hunt in the night. We do see, but after some time, when our pupils get adjusted to the dark, we can see based on whatever light is coming in. But then again, we depend more on our cones. We do have a certain amount of rods, but not as many as cats that can see exceptionally well. You know, they have like night vision cameras. See, so you have, and there's a part called as the aqueous humor over here. Now this aqueous humor is jelly-like fluid which will keep the lens moist. Okay, that is why if you notice, whenever if you are wearing those contact lenses, okay, those contact lenses, the doctor usually prescribes them. If you don't want to wear your specs, then you wear those contact lenses, and those contact lenses are always like kept immersed in some liquid to keep them moist. And then what you need to, and that is the reason why we keep blinking. Not always that dirt goes inside. We keep blinking to keep that part of the eye moist. Okay, and the aqueous humor does that job of making sure that the outside of the people, otherwise our eyes would just be shut. Okay, it needs to be moist a certain amount. It's not like wet, just moist. Okay, so aqueous humor does that job. Now, a brain plays an important role and would be considered as hand in glove with the eye, because if the eye captures the image, okay, but you need the brain to interpret or to distinguish or differentiate or make sense of what you're looking at, okay. So the brain actually inverts the image. So we spoke about a real and inverted image being formed on the retina. The brain inverts the image, decodes the signal, and then we see the image, okay. So very very important part, brain, as to how we see things and what we see and to make sense of what we are looking at, okay. So we have talking about the light is focused by the cornea, then the iris is by controlling the opening of the pupil and the lens. In dim light, your pupil expands to allow more light to enter your eye. In bright light, it contracts. Okay, so you see what actually the iris is doing. So why does it expand in dim light? So as to enable you to see, and when it opens up more light can come through, okay, and that is happens only in dim light or where there is no light at all. So it considers it safe, not only it considers it safe for the light that is entering through, because there's hardly any light to cause damage. Secondly, you need to see, so whatever light is present, even if it is very very little, it tries to open up so that more and more light can get to, and only if there is light, okay, that is going through your eye, then only you can see things around, okay. So that is why it is very very important that the iris expands, then it contracts when during bright light. That is why they usually tell us not to look at a solar eclipse, because when you look at a solar eclipse, when it's coming out of the solar eclipse, you know that you have the diamond ring structure form. So that time there is bright amount of light that is coming from the sun, and that could actually burn your retina, okay, and you wouldn't be able to stop it. So that is why it is important not to look at a solar eclipse with our naked eye, and make use of certain films like X-ray film or certain specially designed specs to in order to have a look at a solar eclipse. Next, we come to the power of accommodation. And what is the power of accommodation? The ability of the human eye to adjust itself so that it can see objects which are nearby and far away is called accommodation. Okay, so sometimes there are certain objects which are far away, and sometimes the objects is nearby. Like for example, reading of a book. When we read a book, then it is close by, right? But if let's say if you're looking at a ship on the horizon, at a sea or on a beach, then we try to strain our eyes to see that particular ship, which would be very very far away. So how does our eye adjust to images which are close by and far away? That is what we discuss over here, and that is called as the power of accommodation, ability of the eye to see objects which are nearby as well as that which are far away. So it involves the lens as the ciliary muscles, and we have discussed about the ciliary muscle in a previous slide, which we said like adjust the focal length, right? So based on the focal length, we can see objects. When it is adjusted, we can see objects which are close by as well as far away. So ciliary muscles adjust the curvature of the lens and thereby affecting the or adjusting the focal length of the lens. Now, when viewing images that are nearby, ciliary muscles contract, as would have expected. The lens becomes thicker. Okay, it is squeezed into a more convex shape, and the focal length decreases or the curvature increases. the images again fall to the retina. Okay, so that they fall on the retina. Now here the eye is accommodated by taking a thicker shape so that the image falls on the retina. So see, everything, the image has to ultimately fall onto the retina. Only then the brain will receive the signal and will be able to tell us what exactly it is. Okay, so accordingly the center of curvature increases or decreases, and if the center of curvature increases or decreases, the focal length also will vary with respect to the center of the curvature. So when viewing objects that are far away, the ciliary muscles expand. Okay, that is to allow more light to pass through. If only if more light is allowed to pass through, we will be able to see objects which are far, far away. The lens then becomes thicker. Okay, and it is relaxed to into a less convex shape, and the focal length thereby increases. Okay, and curvature as a result decreases. The image once again falls on the retina. So whether there is expansion or contraction of the ciliary muscles, okay, or of the lens in that matter, the image has to fall on the retina for the brain to receive the signal and tell us what exactly we are looking at. Okay, so the eye in this case is accommodating by taking a thinner shape so that the image falls on the retina. This is how it would look when we are looking at objects which are far away, and this is how it would look when we are looking at objects which are close by. So that's come with this we come to two more terms, that is called as the far term and the near point. Sorry, far point and the near point. Let's see what they are. Now, the focal length of the eye cannot be reduced below a certain limit. There's a limit to everything, and beyond that limit, we can't reduce the focal length of the eye. So, if you read a book very close to your eye, it will appear blurred, hazy. I can't see. And but some people can't read a book at all. Then they need specs. Okay. Now, when we can see the minimum distance at which we can see objects very clearly without straining our eyes, that is referred to as the least distance of distinct vision, or it is known as the near point of the eye. See over here, the near point of the eye. This is how the lens looks, and these are the ciliary muscles. Okay. The retina remains the same. The have a look. The image that is being formed is always on the retina. But look at see the difference in the lenses in both the cases. Now, for a young adult with normal vision, the near point is supposed to be 25 centimeters. That is the least distance at which we can distinctly see an object. Coming to the farthest point, or the you can say the maximum distance at which objects can be seen most distinctly without strain, is referred to as the far point of the eye. Okay, for a normal eye, it is infinity. See, when we look, if you go to a beach, okay, and you try to look, we can see things which are at the horizon. We just don't know how far does it stretch. Okay, for us, for the eye, that is infinity. Okay, beyond normal vision. Okay, so for that, and for each person, it will vary. So the far point of the eye is the maximum or the farthest point up to which an eye can see objects clearly. That is, for normal eye, it is infinity. And you see how there is a difference, not just in the lenses in case of the far point and near point, but also have a look at the ciliary muscles. Okay, here the ciliary muscles, have a look how they are, and in case of a near point, how they are. Okay, so in case of the far point, it is far more relaxed to allow more light to come through, And in case of the near point, it is contracted to allow less light to come through, and that allows us to see objects which are nearby. Now, defects of vision. Uh, each person, as that person grows older, okay, may have certain defects in the eye. Sometimes that person can see objects which are nearby but can't see objects which are far away, or sometimes the person can see objects which are far away but can't see objects which are close by. Okay, so varies. Sometimes some elderly people can't see both near as well as far. Okay, apart from that, we also have certain other defects like for example, we have something called as the cataract. Cataract is where you may have a blurry vision of the eye. It's actually clouding of the eye lens. Okay, so let's look at some of them. So some of the common ones actually apart from cataract are myopia or nearsightedness, hypometropia or farsightedness, and presbyopia. We'll look at what each one of these are. Myopia. Okay, and what is this? So in case of myopia, this is what, see, the image should be forming on the retina like this, but in case of myopia the image is formed something like this. Okay, and we'll see what exactly is happening in myopia. In myopia, it is also called as nearsightedness. That means a person with myopia can see objects which are nearby clearly. It means that person will be able to read from a book very clearly, but will not be able to see things which are far away, like a car coming from far. That person will not be able to see. The vision may be blurred. Okay, so this is what happens with myopia. So the defect can be seen over here. Okay, how this is. So the image is formed very early before hitting the retina, and that's why you can see objects which are nearby. The far away images are not formed from. Okay, so the far point of the myopic eye is nearer than infinity. We said the far point of the eye is the farthest point at which we can see an object distinctly. Normal eye. For a normal eye, it is infinity. But for an eye which is suffering from myopia, or for a person which is suffering from myopia, the image is formed nearer than infinity. Why does it occur? It occurs due to excessive curvature of the eye lens. Have a look at this eye lens. How this eye lens should be and how this one is. It curving extra. Then elongation of the eyeball. Okay, now here it is not clearly shown of the elongation, but elongation of the eyeball can happen. Mostly happens with elderly people. Now the image of the distance is formed in front of the retina. That's what I was talking about. It is not forming at the retina, but just in front of the retina. Okay, it should form on the retina, not before the retina, and that's why you can see objects clearly which are nearby, but can't see objects which are far away. How do we correct that defect? We correct that using concave lenses. Look at the concave lens. Okay, that will bring the image back onto the retina. Okay, it doesn't clear the existing defect, but using concave lenses, the focal length is adjusted in such a way that the image is forming onto the retina. So this is myopia, also called as nearsightedness, where people suffering from myopia can see objects which are nearby clearly but can't see objects which are far away. Then you have something called as hypermetropia, and this is opposite of myopia, where you see over here the image is formed beyond the retina. In the previous case in myopia, the image was being formed just in front of the retina. Here it is formed beyond the retina. You will see what exactly happens and why does it happen and how is it corrected. So this is referred to as far-sightedness. A person with hypometropia can see objects which are far away, but can't see objects which clearly which are nearby. So won't be able to read clearly. But if there is, let's say, a ship on the horizon, that person will be able to see that shape very clearly. You can see objects clearly which are far away but not objects which are nearby. So the near point of the eye is what, 25 centimeters. So in this case that is not possible with a person suffering from hypermetropia. Hyper means more. Okay. So the focal length is vastly increased in this case, and can't see it is the image is being formed beyond the retina. Okay. And basically, again, once again, hypometropia is also like a vision that problem that happens over a period of time as you grow older, as a result of weakening of the ciliary muscles. The ciliary muscles, as you may know, uh, adjust the opening and closing, or expansion or contraction of the crystalline lens. So when that weakens, then it can't really adjust, and it decreases the flexibility of the eye lens. So focal length of the eye, as I mentioned to you, is too long, and that is why the image that is formed is beyond the retina. And also at sometimes the eyeball has become too small. There are instances when the eyeball becomes too small. Old age, if you're suffering from diabetes and so forth, yes. So image, as I mentioned, is formed beyond the retina. So how do we correct this thing? So if we need to use convex lenses, see in the previous case for for myopia, we used concave lenses. Here we use convex lenses. But remember, in both the cases we use lenses. No mirrors are used. Okay, we need to use lenses. So to correct hypometropia, we use convex lens. So that reduces the focal length and brings it to your to a point where the image falls onto the retina. Then you can read objects. You can read books basically. Hmm? So, anyways, the adjustment is done based on how the severity of your defect. Okay? It is not like one size fits all. Then you have something called as presbyopia. Now, presbyopia can be considered as a mixture of, or a combination of myopia and hypometropia. Means you can't see objects which are close by, and you can't see objects which are far away as well. Uh, more, in almost all the cases, presbyopia is seen in elderly people where the ciliary muscles have weakened, eyeball is either become too long or too small, and so forth. Symptoms of old age, you can see wear and tear. Okay, so either the near point moves away. So sometimes sometimes you have convex lenses which are recommended, and sometimes you have a bifocal uh, lenses which are means to adjust to both to the increased focal length or decreased focal length. Okay, and the power of accommodation of the eye usually decreases with aging. Ciliary muscles weaken, thereby decreasing the flexibility of the eye lens. Okay. So what does the bifocal lens consist of? It consists of concave on the upper portion, convex on the lower portion. Okay, so you have concave as well as convex lenses but the upper portion consists of concave and the lower portion consists of convex.